So I think it would be good if I gave you the power and you did a little qigong.
We already went through the chat box and the links
Oh, good.
while you were reconnecting. Are we ready for Qigong?
I think so.
Okay. All right. Well, if you'd like to join me in some movement, we'll find a place to reach out and spread our wings if need be without disturbing our surroundings. And paying homage to David Morrison, when I started doing Tai Chi with him in the front of the Dharma Hall on Duke Street, uh, I was up on a platform. He was down on the regular floor. Gestures, they would be above me. he was uh, he was a key visual signal that where I was in the routine. So the routine that we did is called the Shibashi. It's an 18-step thing, and what we would begin with was feet parallel, knees soft, shoulders soft. Take a breath and sink, and then let the arms rise up together, and then sink again. Just noticing the way the right hand knows what the left hand's doing and stays connected, connected on some level. I guess it's a love relationship between the right and the left hand. They move together. And the knees sink one more time and then open. Resting rib cage. And it's like this.
Whew, that's interesting. Testing one, two. So, dear friends on YouTube and Facebook, I encourage you to join us on Zoom, where Jim Dalton is doing some Qigong right now. overcome any bitterness. Thank you, dear Jim. Would you please rehost me? Thank you, sir. Lots more controls appear. There is one more announcement I'd like to make, which is just on 2 days ago. I agreed with Hollyhock to teach another weekend retreat. And that retreat is on their schedule now. It's possible to sign up. It's the weekend of February 27 and 28. And it's a whole weekend of mindfulness practice, as though we were together, but not. Under the auspices of Hollyhock, which is really Canada's premier retreat center. It's kind of like sort of Canada's Esalen in a way. So there's that. And then there's this. David Morrison. So let us hold David and Emily and all of those who love David in our hearts. And I dedicate this Dharma talk that's coming up to David. Drum is wonderful as a teaching of impermanence, isn't it? We are leaving our time now. We are leaving our time. We're going back in time or sideways in time or to a time when time didn't even exist. As Michael Meade, the great mythologist, would put it, we're going to a time before time was captured and put in little boxes on everyone's wrist. Or it's once upon a time. It's also now. There was a time, a real time in history, when the great cathedrals of Europe were built. They weren't built in a year They weren't built in 5 years. They weren't built in a decade. They weren't built in 25 or 30 years. They took over 100 years to build. So the persons who started out building them never saw their completion. And some years ago, in what we think of as our time, I had the privilege of being present with a great shaman of our era called Rachel Naomi Remen, a great teacher. She was speaking to 300 or 400 doctors. I had led a meditation, and then everyone was ready for the keynote speaker, Rachel Naomi Remen. And she told this little story. It's about those great cathedrals and about the people who built them. It's the story of the 3 stonecutters. So there's a reflection of a person, perhaps a seeker, perhaps someone from the media, approached the first stonecutter, who was there with his hammer and chisel, and there was to the left of him a pile of rocks that were quite rough. And he took them, and he used his hammer and chisel, chiseled away at them, and made them into usable blocks that were just the right size, just what was needed up on the wall. And the interviewer asked him, "So what is it you're doing?" And he said, "Well, those guys over there bring me the rough rocks. I chisel them, I put them over here in the pile. I make a little better than minimum wage. There's no medical coverage. And that's it." So the seeker went on further around the wall and came upon another man, perhaps a woman, perhaps a person, certainly a person, who was receiving similar blocks of rough stone coming from the quarry and doing exactly the same job, chiseling off the parts that stuck out and making serviceable blocks that were just exactly what they needed up on the wall. And the seeker asked this person, "What is it you're doing?" And they paused, looked down at the rocks, said, "Well, this is a really good job. I get to spend all day cutting these rocks, and I make them pretty accurate, and I get paid well enough, and my family likes it that I bring home enough money that we can have food and health care and send the kids to school." So the interviewer goes on and encounters a third stonecutter. And she says to the third stonecutter, "What is it you're doing?" And the third stonecutter looks over at the rough rocks and says, "My friends over there bring me these rough stones. And I have been so privileged in my life. My father showed me how to use a chisel and a hammer, and I have one. I have this set of them here. I have certain chisels I use for this kind of rock and certain chisels for that kind of rock, and I take these rough stones and I cut them to the specifications of the people up on the wall, and I pay really close attention because I want them to fit just right. And even more important, do you know that I am part of a great undertaking? We are building a cathedral that will stand for hundreds of years. Tens of thousands of people will come here and find solace from their suffering. There will be marriages and funerals and coronations, and this cathedral will stand through wars. Babies will be blessed here. I am part of something of unimaginable magnitude. And so when I get my paycheck, I am so grateful that I get to be part of something as important as this. We are the descendants in a lineage that comes to us unbroken from the time of the Buddha. Depending upon how one counts generations, it's 120 to 150 of generations of teacher to student transmission of a teaching of liberation, of a teaching that is rooted in the revelation in ourselves of compassion and love. One part of that amazing transmission of teachings is the Noble Eightfold Path. So the first aspect of the Eightfold Path is really examining our worldview. What's my worldview? What's the lens I look out at the world through? We're seeing in our nation now this incredible split. And people really subscribing to very different worldviews. And so our worldview, one worldview is that there's a limited supply of things, and we better get what I need for myself and my family, and stronger borders, and there's another worldview which has to do with, well, let's figure out how we can share better and care for our weak, and let's not let superficial issues like gender identity and skin color and language be seen as big differences between us. But anyway, along comes the Buddha and says, well, let's look at it even more deeply and say that there's a cause of suffering, and that cause of suffering is craving, and that you can set yourself free of craving and suffering by practicing, by learning how to meditate and cleaning up your moral and ethical behavior and so on. So I don't want to belabor the first step of the Eightfold Path, because it's the second one I want to come to, which is that, well, let me finish that. There's also the three great hypotheses, the three great characteristics of the universe, which is it true that everything's impermanent? If you really get that, suffering diminishes remarkably. And as I said at the beginning, David is giving us the amazing gift of disappearing. Because he, right now, still is here as a body. But before long, he will follow all of the people before us, and will follow soon, and somehow mysteriously vanish. So, there's anicca, impermanence. There's dukkha, unsatisfactoriness. Because everything's changing, there's no way to get permanently satisfied. And then the great teaching of liberation, which is that if we look really, really closely, we'll never find a self. We'll find this amazing living process of which we are an integral part. And then finally, in worldview, we have the law of karma, that how we act is important because it creates the next moment, it creates who we are in the next moment. Choices. And then there's the second aspect of the Eightfold Path, which is my thoughts, my intentions, my aspirations. Because we tend to become what we think about, what we aspire towards. And we're supposed to aspire toward money, power, fancy vacations, success in worldly terms. And that can leave us pretty hungry. Not hungry, physically hungry. It leaves us overfed probably more than anything. But we can be spiritually very hungry. Because what aspirations actually bring us happiness? And according to the Buddha, the aspirations that bring us happiness are the aspiration to renounce things, to not chase after everything that comes along in the greed cycle, and also to become kind, compassionate, and wise. So nice. Think of that as a compass heading. I may have another 5 minutes to live, or I may have another 5 years, or 20 years, or 50 years, whatever, depending upon one's age. When it comes my turn to be preparing to leave, who do I want to be? Do I want to be frightened, defensive, clinging, worried about what's going to happen to my wealth afterwards? Or do I want to be, do you want to be deeply at ease, surrounded in love, radiating love, being able to comfort the people around you who will be freaked out probably? To what do I aspire? And our choice of aspiration affects how we spend our time. For many people at the beginning, it's a big deal to set aside 5 minutes for meditation. And a really big deal to set aside 20 minutes and an hour a day. I mean, how could I possibly sacrifice that much of my life? I suppose it could mean turning off the news. Watch a different program, your own internal life. Another potential way to word the aspiration I'd really like to become a great master of understanding impermanence. There's an oft quoted by me, statement from Ajahn Buddhadasa, one of the last century's great masters in Thailand, that the truth of impermanence screams at us with the brilliance of a million suns. It's a miracle we don't see it. That's the great miracle. And then we're surprised when things end. So just a little foray into impermanence. There was a time, they say, 14.2 billion years ago, approximately, when there was nothing. And then Vishnu turned over in his sleep, opened his eyes, and the universe came into being. He was awakened from his sleep by a fly that landed on his nose. He opened his eyes and the fly flew off. He opened his eyes and all the galaxies, everything came into being. And he looked across the room wondering, where is that pesky fly? And he didn't see it. And on the far side of the room, he closed his eyes and all the universes vanished out of being. Now, we could say that's a very unscientific model, isn't it? Well, the Western physicists say the universe burped or something, and out of nothing came everything. It's another nice story. And since then, all the galaxies have been flying apart from each other at extreme speeds. Planets have formed, civilizations have come and gone millions of times probably. And then at some point, 4.2 billion years ago, the Earth formed, a dust cloud orbiting the sun formed into a planet, went through all these changes, became Earth, became this home base. And then the gases changed because of bacteria, and continents shifted, and the dinosaurs came and went. Something like 99% of all species that ever lived are gone. But we're here right now, and we're shocked that things are impermanent. How could anything in this universe be anything less than utterly unstable? So there's a way, and then let me take that just a little further. What happens when you sit down in meditation and you watch? Yesterday, the mind was like this. Today, it's like this. A moment ago, I was very concentrated, and now it's off the wall. So in the midst of all this, you got born, I got born, we're all here, so to speak. And we have this lineage of teachings coming down from the Buddha that says many things remarkable, one of which is you can suffer a lot less. And we suffer a lot less when we start living in reality rather than in fantasy. And how do we cultivate living in reality? One moment at a time, being mindful of what's happening now. And noticing the mind's propensity to go into these fantasies. There was something else I wanted to read. Let me see if it's still here. Nope. I can find it though. It's way down at the bottom. Suffering. Here we go. It's from the Sufis, from Pir Vilayat Inayat Khan, modern Sufi. In the Sufi tradition, there is a saying, overcome any bitterness that may have come because you were not up to the magnitude of the pain that was entrusted to you. Like the mother of the world who carries the pain of the world in her heart, each of us is part of her heart and therefore endowed with a certain measure of cosmic pain. You are called upon to meet it in compassion and equanimity instead of self-pity and despair. The secret? Offer your heart as a vehicle to transform cosmic suffering into love. In the Sufi tradition, there is a saying, overcome any bitterness that may have come because you were not up to the magnitude of the pain that was entrusted to you. Like the mother of the world who carries the pain of the world in her heart, each of us is part of her heart and therefore endowed with a certain measure of cosmic pain. You are called upon to meet it in compassion and equanimity instead of self-pity and despair. The secret? Offer your heart as a vehicle to transform cosmic suffering into love. Three stonecutters. One of them a little resentful. I have to work all the time. It's hard. It's backbreaking, in fact. One who gets it as it's a reason, that's life. You got to work, and this is good enough. And another who realizes, I'm alive. This body is not permanent. And it's still working pretty darn well. Or maybe it's sick. No doubt. How many of us are there? There's 85 people on here. No doubt there are some people in this 85 people who are working with significant illness. Maybe, quote, terminal illness. Or maybe, as I'm discovering with my hip, a degeneration that is going to last for the duration. We can be grumpy about it. We can be sort of benign about it, or we can realize the extraordinary opportunity we have by being alive. These are, the adjective is interesting. These are interesting times politically, for instance. It's a big deal for us as Americans. And of course, this same dance is happening in several countries around the world. It's not an uncommon dance. So we can get all caught up in it and be angry or take a side and suffer a lot. Or we can remember the teachings on impermanence and compassion and love and still perhaps take a side, but in a really different way, because we have our aspiration clear. I want to use every action that I take to develop understanding of impermanence, and I want to also use it to discover compassion and love. And everything changes. And also, I just had a flash through of being with Ruth Denison on retreats. The more deeply we understand anicca, impermanence, and dukkha, and anatta for that matter, not self, the more at ease we are in this constantly out of control changing world. because it's all going to change. It's all going to fall apart. It's all going to disappear. And our task along the way is to be as kind and compassionate and to reduce what suffering we can. But we can relinquish the fantasies. And I've had these so deeply in my life that we're going to make the ultimate difference and that everything will be okay from then on. And it hasn't been the case in my life. So I want to go back to the 3 stonecutters for a moment. And that poem about pain. I'm in recovery. I'm in recovery from poor me, ain't it awful, my life is really hard, and it's not fair. Poor me, ain't it awful that I had this experience with parents, that I had this experience with whatever. I was betrayed in this way and that way, and whenever this mind goes to, I was betrayed, it tends to forget, oh, and I betrayed in this way and that way. It tends to be one-sided. So let's bring love and compassion to ourselves and to our aspirations and to life, and to remember the incredible privilege that we have of having this particular pile of stones, these particular neurotic, traumatic wounds. And it's out of them that we build the cathedral. We build the altar of our hearts. We build our destiny. And we can practice doing it more willingly and less begrudgingly, because we each get our certain measure of cosmic pain. It's just the way it is. It is a very significant pleasure for me to sit here and see your little images on my screen. Some of you are so familiar, friends for a long time. Some of you are newer. A couple of folks on my screen I don't recognize. And there's probably people among the non-pictorial ones that might even be here for the first time. If that's the case, I really hope this is useful to you. But thank you for coming. Thank you for taking, if you're here from the beginning, it's 2 hours on a Sunday morning. Now that shows a big commitment already. Right? It's a very small minority of persons who will ever do this, practice this way. I don't know, maybe in the time of the Buddha it was a mass movement, though I know 1979 I went to Burma for a week, Rangoon, and one of the things that I saw there, I was at a temporary monastery in downtown Rangoon, but I went to visit. I was taken on a tour, and I went to Tatanayekta, which is a large. It's a campus as big as the Lewis and Clark College campus here in town, and beautiful. And one of the things that I saw there was a flock of pink girls. They were all dressed in these really silly pink outfits, silly to my eyes. And they went by in silence. And it turned out that we found out that they were the graduating class in economics from the university, the Rangoon University, 35 or 40 of them. And they had decided to a person, every single one of them, that their graduation present to themselves was going to be 1 month of group meditation together. And the schedule at Tatanayekta was about 14 hours a day of meditation, an hour of sitting and an hour of walking. So sometimes this practice can be a social movement. And as we've seen in Myanmar, I guess it's now called, even that level of devotion to practice doesn't mean there isn't going to be horrors. Horrors encouraged by people posing as Buddhist monks. Geeks. So, mindfulness. And I guess I want to say one more thing before I end, which is, please take a moment to admire yourself, to thank yourself, right? To make the wise choice to practice together and hear a Dharma talk and do some mindful movement with Jim. What an amazing choice. And that choice then strengthens more choices of that kind. And then the aspiration, what do I want to become when I grow up? Well, I want to become a Buddha. I want to become more generous. I want to become more kind and loving and patient. And with underlying all of which is I want to be more and more happy. I just, oh dear. I can tell you this. I had a chance. I went for a walk with my daughter Tara yesterday on Mount Tabor, and this family, a quintessential family, appeared. They had 2 large dogs that looked really identical and lovely, and Tara's in the process of getting a dog in about a month from now, so she was into the dogs, and she said to them, wow, those are 2 really beautiful dogs. And the family lit up, and there were little girls, 2 little girls. And I heard come out of my mouth, well, you know, the dogs are nice, but the grown-ups and these 2 beautiful little girls are pretty cool too. And the 6 of us just roared. It was quite lovely. And we had a moment of connection. So we can live in more and more love and feel less and less isolated. And then when we encounter people who are trapped in some view of things which is making them angry and hurt, then we can be much more compassionate and useful to them too. Or at least non-reactive. So I want to pause there and invite you to share if you want. To ask questions, to share something arising from this talk, whatever is of importance to you. So to do that, please just unmute yourself and speak. Hello, Maggie. Thank you, Maggie. Can you imagine a house with 4 Great Danes? Jeez. Oh, and we we have a pet camel and an elephant to round it out. Hello, John. Mm. 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 Thanks, John. Have you come across, oops, have you come across the book You're Not Your Pain? It's by, I looked it up here. It's by Vidyamala Birch. She's British. I met her at a teacher's conference 5 years ago, and I was really impressed with her. It's she's a insight meditation based. I don't know if she's a physical therapist or whatever, but it's a wonderful book. I've recommended it. Her name is Burch. You are not your pain. Using mindfulness to relieve pain, reduce stress, and restore well being. There also is on portlandinsight.org, under the guided meditations, there's here David Mayer beat me to the punch. There's dissolving pain, and the one below it, I forget the title. Those are meditations I was taught by Stephen Levine, specifically for David. You're too fast. And Spacious Mind is the second one, and the links are on the site. David, good going. Yeah. Uh-huh. May you be free from identification with that pain. Karen. Hello, my dear. Where on the planet are you? Oh, good. I guess. You're closer to me. It feels better that way. Mm. Mm. I don't know about time, but length of time practice. But it seems to me that we can't realize we're part of something really bigger until we've really faced into our own pain, our own selfish pain, our own trauma, and the stories of poor me, ain't it awful, and until we've grieved that, and then we realize, I, way back in my first graduate program in 1972, 71, there was this great guy. I'm forgetting his name right now, but he introduced me to interpersonal communication training. I didn't know it existed until then. Bob Mark was his name. And he made this wild statement that once you really become attuned to yourself, you can actually see other people's moods. Like if there's someone who's depressed, you'll be able to see it. And I remember when my vision got clear enough to begin to notice that. And then, of course, I go through the world and I meet that depressed or joyful or whatever clerk at Fred Meyer, and it's obvious this person's hurting, or this person's really stoned, or whatever it is one runs into. So I think it behooves us to do our own work, to become as loving as we can, to learn to bear the suffering in our life like a wagon bears a load, to face the dukkha, and to open more and more and more and realize it's a shared thing. We're all the walking wounded, and there's no one who isn't. Even those people whose Facebook page is all smiles, behind the scenes, there's agony, there's suffering. So is that addressing your... Well, let me say this personally to you. I saw you with your mom. I saw you being really loving and putting your own needs on the back burner. I haven't seen you go to work, but I know that you sometimes go to work and are a being of love and light. And other times you're a grouch. But why would you not? Because sometimes the pain builds up and we have trouble seeing outside it. And other times, like what I'm thinking, after you've done a retreat, you're that third stone cutter. You know, when your own batteries are well filled, and so and I think you're right that we can oscillate into that and out and in, and depending upon the pain level in our own lives. And not so long ago, when you had all that death happening around in your family, of course you were holding on for dear life. And I guess it's just one last thing. We do need to make time for our practice, and we need to be merciful with ourselves when we are contracted, and maybe act out unskillfully that we're doing the best we are, as my dad put it. Vic, good morning. Mm. Mm. There is a Caring Bridge site, which I sent out a note on the listserv, the email list, and more will be revealed there. And I'll also send out something on the email list. Oh, oh no. Jim, you mentioned candles class tonight, first and third Sundays. Great. There was a link. Mm. Mhm. Mhm. Thanks, Jim. I mean, I've had the experience 100 times. I don't know. We've been doing this for a lot of mornings during the week of getting up tired, a little bit out of sorts, sit for a while, and surface maybe, but then get on here and experience the presence of my beloveds, and something shifts. It's like, oh, right. It's not just my little melodrama. It's ours. It's our journey. So, oh. Well, it's a little afternoon. I'd like to end somewhat close to on time. Anybody else sitting with something that you'd really like to, that would be important to share? Hello, Lorraine. Mm-hmm. 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 What about this? There's no requirement to engage, and sometimes it would be foolhardy, right? Standing in the way of that mob in the Capitol would have been foolhardy. But other times, one can say something, and one can um, um, one can maybe even be useful to them or to oneself. Um, I'm actually thinking in my time with my daughter yesterday. Um, she knows a lot about COVID, and she knows a lot about the vaccines. She's working at Kaiser in the Pfizer vaccine trial there. And she shared with me several encounters that she had. Usually she doesn't respond to people on Facebook, but there were some people speaking complete and utter untruths about the vaccine. And she read me the things that she wrote, and they were, in a certain way, very confrontive, but not rancorous, but for instance, she said there was a person who was minimizing COVID. And she said, well, from a different experience base, I went and worked in New York at the height of the crisis, and I held people's hands as they died. And I've seen what kind of a death this is, and you don't want it. And then around the vaccine, of course, people have a fever sometimes after the second injection. That's not a side effect. That's an expected effect as the body builds antibodies. And it was like boom, 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 boom. And it wasn't even really an argument. It was just, here's the information. And I have on a couple of occasions said, I would feel much more safe and comfortable if you were to wear a mask. It's about me. And then if you can't wear a mask, for my own sake, I'm going to leave now. I'll buy my door somewhere else, not because I dislike you, but it's not safe for me. So, and then we have to pick our moments and be kind to ourselves. Any help? And whatever you did was probably right on the money for you. Mm-hmm. Normal. Right. So have mercy, and sometimes we confront our limitations, and other times we just let ourselves be limited and do our business with people if we want to. I see kids. Well, shall we sing our way out here? Yeah. So please unmute. Please join me tomorrow morning if you wish, or Wednesday night for the beginning of the 4 Foundations of Mindfulness adventure. So oh, that's right. Yep. All right. I'm gonna move over here. Hey kids, do you want to lead us? All right. There we go. When you're ready. Beings be happy. May all beings be happy. May all beings be happy. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Well, that was fun. Goodbye, lovely friends. Goodbye. Thanks for being here. What a funny ritual to end with. Right, and the way we shrink at the end, it's cool. Goodbye, Cameron and Pat and Maria and Joyce and Carol and Alexander and Marla and Corbin and Janet and Sherry. Goodbye. Have a lovely day. All right, friends on Facebook and YouTube. That seems to have worked fine. It's Zoom that crashes. So, have a fine, mindful